together or try to compress a curriculum that extends many, many, many years back into 6 minutes and 40 seconds. And so I decided I'd try to start with more or less what the university expects of curriculum to look like. Chart that sequences courses, tells you where you're meeting your dead end requirements, all that stuff. And then I discovered that's about as boring a conversation as you can have. And so I started to look at some other ways that we reflect on curriculum, ways we think about things, and I kind of like this quote, which is to remind us that we're supposed to forget that stuff. Our curriculum doesn't work off of ready-made answers. We're constantly searching for other kinds of possibilities, and rarely do we find those moments where we repeat things over and over. What I started to discover as well is that, much like Jason was talking, that there's a great degree of work done that is sort of exhaustive in how we think, and the curriculum is structured in a way that we think through what we're made. It also means that the way he describes the program as a whole, the school as a whole, is very much intertwined with how the curriculum folds into that. So it's not to say you can dissect them quickly and easily. This would be an example of representative work from almost every studio all at once. In this case, because a foundation work starts to come in, and it's at the very first moment that we say you should be making with your hands, you should be thinking through what you make. It's not about trying to give you lessons that are theoretically based, at which point you sort of find the answer, but instead we want you to look for multiple answers. We want you to explore and risk and do all kinds of other things. That leads to a broader set of ideas with the upper division curriculum that start to ask questions about architecture's role in context. So how does it begin to respond to places that either you can visit or that are more knowable? Begins to approach ideas of architecture that might be more conventional in terms of it's a building, we can recognize things, but I could also argue that these are entirely speculative at the same time. They're suggestive of architectural potentials without trying to resolve themselves into conventional strategies alone. And so we'll ask questions of entry, ask questions of how you interface with the context. How does the studio work support that? How do you bring supporting coursework into that in a way that makes technical issues meaningful and embraces and informs the design? That's where then I decided maybe I'll shift to some other funky things. I've tried this a little bit before, where I started to look and say the great thing about our curriculum is that it provides resistance. It's a weird way to think about it because it's also the vehicle by which we move. So I looked at Levius Woods' sort of architectural resistance and said there's all kinds of funny little points in there that are incredibly powerful for how we work. And that's where, to me, the curriculum has that kind of resistance. There's a moment where it lets us tailor things. In this case, saying it encourages us to work with our hands and think through the tools that we use. And in many ways, that's the place where our students find their greatest versatility. It's more so that they actually are nimble. They aren't ever trapped by one tool. A lot of other schools, I think, have started to find that kind of struggle, that the students get into one way of working, and that's the only way they know how to do it, where we're constantly oscillating between handwork, between drawing and modeling, between big scales and small scales. That's a freshman studio on the top, and it starts to move down, and you see the other part is that we're prolific in production. And so there's a great quote by Robert Irwin that says, amateurs are wait for inspiration, the rest of us just get to work. We're of that second mindset. We'd rather see the students working the curriculum and use the curriculum to support that. What that means is we're asking and tasking the exercises in a way that there's skill building, there's conceptual thinking that's embraced alongside it. Usually we're telling students they have to risk and be courageous about what they do. There's moments where they're working at full scale and trying to explore ideas of shadow and light and other kinds of qualities, where the material is what provides the resistance. The prior one was a drawing that would have set something like this up. For which one you said there's also the connections between projects. And so in the curriculum in any one studio, but also between the courses, is incredibly fluid but and interwoven. And it extends all the way through from the freshman studios to the graduate studios. So this is actually a graduate student who's exploring the same kind of material qualities, except at a much higher level, talking about atmospheric characteristics, issues of casting, issues of scoring, ways of working between stereotomy and assembled components. But in that sense, reflecting some of those early lessons at the freshman level. The other part that's interesting is I think we try to embrace what Levius Woods says in one of his moments, which is to say you resist architecture as being buildings only, something like that. And so our curriculum actually allows students to say architecture can be many, many things. It doesn't merely have to arrive at a building at the end. It can provoke an idea of building as the priority. There's an awful lot of things that also come up. With me, I like the risk being panicked about that you're alone. It's one of the key parts of our, not just curriculum, but to say we have a culture in the place of which the curriculum is that part of that vehicle. Every semester with a teaching methods class that I think Nina might talk about, which is to try to map the history of the curriculum. And in our case, there's another panel on this side that goes back to the beginning of time. In this case, this is just sort of 20th century, at which point the students discover that most of our work ties all the way back into the Bauhaus, if not earlier. We also have moments like this. This is a door window stair exhibit where the work is never isolated to the studio. There's always moments where it's being brought out, exhibited for everybody to participate in, talk about, critique. Sometimes they're in here, sometimes they're out in the atrium, sometimes they're in another room, but it's always a public venue. And in that case, you say the curriculum is something that feeds its parallel studios, its peers and other things. It's never just one moment, I move to the next class, it carries over to the next one. That there's always synergy and intersections between different things. No. But that's also to say that it works something like this, and I can say the students in the room are completely familiar with this environment, which is that we never want to talk about things that are in their heads. It's always about whatever's on the wall, what's in front of you. More so, we could point to the image on the left. That's the students talking. In many cases, the faculty try to foster conversation, and then we get out of the way. So the curriculum is much more about letting the students engage in that kind of work rather than us dictating to them. Which then gets me to those sort of the last bits of the resistance that I like those last two ones, the tendency to repeat yourself and the feeling of utter exhaustion. All students get exhausted, but they never sort of suffer from it. They're always eternally productive. The other part is to say that we never repeat ourselves. This is a diagram of our curriculum from like 1990s, something like that. There's another version earlier. I could say, think of that first map, this is a more accurate representation of how our curriculum works because it's constantly oscillating, it's a living document, it's always evolving, it's finding the connections between things rather than isolating them into silos.
I'm very impressed, Mark.
Next up, we have Nina Hofer. You're our last, one more representative after you of our school. Nina Hofer, Associate Professor. She,
Creative, and you should all do it. That's my 7-second version. So, okay. So I really love this picture. This is what it feels like to teach in first year. The professor has a role in our organization, but it's not in terms of the transmission of knowledge. We are creating a community in which we're generating learning, and there's a cast of characters involved in it. Every one of these slides was contributed by one of the students involved in it, and so the first 6 will be a pairing of first-year work that was done in the design studio with work from a graduate student's final project, the very last thing that happens at the school here. I'm going to create the cohort for you. If you 40 people are Design 2 students, then you would be you'd be taught by these 2 who are actually GTAs, and this 40 would be taught by her and another one. Supervising these 2 groups of GTAs, we have one professor, that would be me. That group would be assisted by a kind of vast cohort of TAs, there's some of them in the back, who are undergraduate students who are there really to learn alongside. They're really there to learn to be GTAs. So they're not there to teach, they're there to ask questions from a more advanced level, to create a kind of culture of architecture in that classroom. We think of design 1 and 2 as being a kind of total immersion situation, and they kind of raise the language of the architecture that's happening between those groups. So it's a kind of gradated system where you start as a first-year student, move through, kind of begin to haunt the class as a second-year student. As a third and fourth-year students, you can take teaching methods, which Mark is in charge of now. Several of us teach it. And then you can become a GTA. When you're a GTA, you're actually in charge of the class, and professors are supervising you. So on the, again, every one of these slides was contributed by a student as a dyad. The only 2 slides that I designed were the first one and the last one. And this first set of 6 were contributed by Kim Connell, who was here last year teaching with us. And so, we're looking at design 2 work, which is about kind of fundamental spatial ideas like plenum, which are introduced in an abstract way, and simultaneously pursuing an MRP project and the idea of a plenum, or a volume of space that's activated by sound and light and activity, is present for MRP as well. This next set is being generated by work that we're doing right now. And there's this very powerful effect. This is sort of both design 2 work. There's a very powerful connection between the work that happens in first year and the MRP students. We're doing analysis in first year now, and it's affecting the work of our most advanced students. The GTAs, it's a very sought-after position to teach. There's monetary, it helps us to finance their education, but it helps us as well. It's a very mentored position. They don't just, move in there. They get progressive responsibilities. And their job includes inventing the projects, making assignments, developing and implementing the in-class exercises, and grading, which really, for those of you who teach, that's everything. We work with them. We meet with them outside of class to kind of think about what's going to happen in the future and to look closely at assignments.
But now, as soon as you push go, okay. So this will be a little different than what we just talked about, but we're going to talk about one particular project that we're in the middle of that's bridging between research and teaching worlds with a group of our students. And it's a project that is built out of something called the Solar Decathlon that's rooted in the Greek tradition of the athletic competition that's looking for the best all-around athlete. So it's looking at ways that we evaluate speed and strength, agility, different kinds of muscles that we're testing in different ways. And for me, it's really tied to this idea of design and building work that doesn't have a single driver, but rather has to answer to a number of different, often competing issues. And it's also a way for us to think about how we might bridge between silos of knowledge, design and theory, construction and architecture. The DOE created this thing called the Solar Decathlon in 2002. They've been held more or less biannually since then, with the next one happening this year in 2015. There are also a series of related competitions that have been developed in Europe, China, and in Latin America. So a couple of key goals: educate students, engage the public. And the education of the students over the last decade has involved more than 17,000 collegiate students. Engaging the public, typically it involves about 70,000 people visiting houses in person. These are the 10 contests that make up the decathlon. So just like the Olympic competition, there are 10 events. The ones on the left are juried, the ones on the right are measured through a series of sensors installed in the houses. We started our work by looking at Gainesville, where we are and where our house will live, and we looked at Irvine, California, which is where the competition will be held. A lot of things are similar. The sun paths are almost identical because of our latitude, but the water and humidity condition is not the same. And with that, armed with that, we looked at the case study house program, specifically as a way of rethinking the model of the house and what the house might be. And we were interested in some things that came out of this announcement in 1945 that said, we're not interested in this being the neatest trick of the week, but rather we want to address more fundamental issues. And the team traveled and looked at a series of Eigler homes in California. We were interested in the thinness, in a way, of the architecture, the reduction, the post and beam construction, as strategies for us to start to reduce our footprint. We're building in Florida on the far right. We have to get the house to the far left of our continent. And so in response to this 2,300-mile trip, we have started to look at building a series of modules. Those modules are what you see here in plan as these rectangles with one that gathers together the wet components and the mechanical spaces, 2 for bedrooms, and 2 for living, dining, kitchen. All of those wrapping and creating an exterior living space that can become an extension of the house. Here in a plan that's currently under development, you can start to see how walls start to emerge out of that with the
African linguistics.
That's good.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry, what was your name again?
Fiona McGlothlin. That's it. Okay, thank you. I'm a linguist, and linguists have been interested in the city for a long time because cities are places of linguistic innovation, And these innovations tend to move from city to city before they diffuse into the surrounding countryside. And so this is something that's been of interest for a long time, but not so much in terms of being able to speak to urbanists. We never speak to them because of the ways in which we have constructed linguistics as an object and the way we talk about it. So in thinking about this as an architecture conference, I thought, how am I possibly going to address anything that has anything to do with architecture? And then I decided that maybe the way to go would be to talk about walls. So I'm going to start off with walls, because this is something that architects understand. And for linguists as well, who are now, things are changing, and there's been a renewed interest in writing as a sociolinguistic object, and in particular, writing in the public sphere. And there's a field known as linguistic landscape, which I think has a lot of potential. It's been focused on multilingualism, multigraphism, the use of different scripts, and what those happen to mean in particular contexts, and how those inform the urban space. Now, from the point of view of a citizen who lives in an urban space in Africa, walls can also be they can be backgrounds for texts and for writing. They're just part of what I consider to be the written environment, if we want to talk in terms of relating to urbanists and using your vocabulary for this. We can have political graffiti written on walls. One of the things that has come out of this field of linguistic landscape with regard to Africa is that it's very different from other environments, mainly because of the high incidence of what's known as exographia, where what you have in the spoken environment is different from what you have in the written environment. In many, many African societies, you speak one language and write in a different one. So this is something that plays in here. Now, advertising, as I said, is something that can be done in a variety of ways. And here is a plumber advertising with a cell phone number. But also corporate advertising that can go into this as well. And so two South African scholars, Sibonile Mpendukana and Christopher Stroud, have worked a lot on linguistic landscape insofar as it constructs sites of necessity and sites of luxury. So this is sort of an upscale area. Here we have Air France advertising in Dakar, Senegal, shopping trips to Paris, not within the range of what most people can do, and the ironies of where it's located I think are pretty evident there. So these kinds of imagined sites of luxury for citizens to sort of reimagine their futures, and then sites of necessity, such as this one, which is the Langa Township in Cape Town, where you see an ad for abortion up there as part of the linguistic landscape. Now, linguists are looking at what kinds of languages, what kinds of scripts these are written in addition to the kinds of ideologies they portray, as in this one from the recent Francophonie Conference.
And he is a PhD candidate here in our Department of Anthropology.
Hi everyone. This short presentation is about the footprint of Chinese infrastructure projects in Africa. According to Engineering News Record 2013 report, 6 of the top 10 contractor companies in Africa are Chinese companies. So I'll take you through several of them. And first, this is the Tanzania-Zambia Railway, built from 1970 to 75. Which cost $500 million, and it's also called the Freedom Railway. This was done at a time when China's GDP per capita is less than $800. Now, in more recent times, this 17-kilometer aided highway rehabilitation and expansion project connects a city called Ofankor in northward from Accra in Ghana to Salam Town in the eastern region. And another example is this Gotera intersection bridge in Ethiopia and Addis Ababa, which cost $17 million, first of its kind in the nation. And another example will come up pretty soon. bridge is being completed by China Railway Wuju Corporation. This is part of the Burma Camp Road 1 project, also conducted in Ghana, which relieves a lot of traffic jam on the Tetekwashi interchange, completed in 2014. And also China also built a lot of hydroelectric and dams projects around the continent. This shows the Bui hydroelectric project on the Black Volta River in Ghana. This 400 megawatt dam cost $622 million in total, and 1,216 people were resettled. And this is another example in Sudan. This is called the dam complex of Upper Atbara project. Built, we can see the two dams there, and they will be mainly used for irrigation and irrigated. It has a capacity of 3 billion cubic meters and can irrigate 500,000 hectares. This is the closer look at the project in progress. And it's constructed by China International Water and Electric Corporation. There are also hospitals built by Chinese construction companies. The majority of them are aid projects. For example, this one is a hospital in Paroko in Benin, 425 kilometers northeast of the capital. And government office buildings for them. For this one is the new office of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Ghana. In 2008, China also built Ghana's defense ministry as well. It was designed by a Chinese architectural design company. This is a closer look at the front of the building at the handover ceremony in 2011. I also did some research on the construction side while they were building this structure.
All right, good afternoon. As said, my name is Ben Bergen, and I'm a PhD candidate in anthropology here at UF. This presentation is based on ethnographic fieldwork carried out across 10 rural towns in the Senegal River Valley of both Mauritania and Senegal. And in discussing the built environment, I hope to highlight the social significance that several types of structures hold for local people and the messages that they convey. Transnational migration is an essential part of this story, as these buildings stand as manifestations of ongoing migrant commitments, physically representing connections with family members abroad. When traveling for the first time through the Senegal River Valley, one is struck by the prevalence of large, concrete, often brightly painted structures that stand shoulder to shoulder with more traditional mud brick compounds. Both the scale and number of these buildings distinguish the Senegal River Valley from other regions of rural Senegal and Mauritania. Many of the recently built structures stand in stark contrast to the traditional mud brick buildings that flank them, but are also surprising because of the rural setting in which they are found. Despite the large buildings, these towns don't often serve as major market centers and aren't located at important transit points. In the Senegal River Valley, mud brick construction remains prevalent. Traditionally, mud brick buildings form the basis of large extended family compounds and are constructed and maintained by the inhabitants, who replaster them annually before the onset of the rainy season. Mud brick construction is well suited to the hot, mostly arid environment. The rooms and thatched porches in front offer cool, shady spaces in the intense heat of the day. Despite their rustic appearance, these homes are being modified to incorporate new conveniences as they come available, such as this solar-powered electric light that you can see in the corner. Nevertheless, there's a widespread preference for building with concrete. However, this requires a significant source of capital, almost always migrant remittances. The centrality of migration in the social and economic life of the towns of the rural Senegal River Valley has grown rapidly as drought and desertification have rendered traditional livelihoods more precarious and unpredictable. This is reflected in the growing wealth disparities between families who have successful migrant members and those who do not. Many successful migrants have used their capital to construct shops and start small businesses, often businesses linked to the migration circuit itself. As you can see, the Western Union and Orange at the bottom, money and communication. But the first goal of almost all aspiring migrants is to build a new house for their family. As one successful migrant put it, I built this big house here for my future and so that I and the young people from my family who live in France can come here and have a place to stay. I want to show them what a nice place you can have here if you save your money and invest it. In Europe, we are all renters. Nothing really belongs to us. Sometimes new homes are integrated into pre-existing extended family compounds, creating visible distinctions of wealth, even within the context of the family. The residents of these concrete structures are proud of their homes and see implications of modernity and progress in the ways that the built environment is changing around them. The forms and materials of the home also have implications for the ways that the hometown is seen in connection with community members raised abroad. Much of the wealth and success of the community rests on maintaining these connections and the remittances that go along with them across the generations. As one household head put it, before, when the children came from France to visit, they'd only stay a few days. They didn't like staying in mud brick houses and would want to leave. Now we have concrete houses and they see how nice they are. We want them to make friends, to do the things we do, and to remember the nice experiences they have. We want to build connections. But in some cases, community members interpret new construction as symbolic of negative change. Many older adults express sentiments similar to these. We used to treat each other as if we shared the same mother. Now that's gone. In the past, people stuck together. Now people don't help each other. Soon it will be everyone for themselves. Perhaps in order to avoid some of this contention, many successful migrants choose to build large homes on the outskirts of the hometown, rather than building new structures within pre-existing extended family compounds. But this serves to further distinguish and separate them from the wider family. These new compounds are literally walled off and don't have the same spatial integration into the community as the former compounds do. Despite these trends in home construction, almost all migrants work hard to maintain their integration into the wider community and to be seen as visible participants in public life. While abroad, migrants remain integrated into the social, political, and economic of their hometown through frequent communication and
Riley, who is also a PhD student, also Department of Anthropology, also in our seminar. Can I start? Okay. Today I'm going to talk to you about plastic, waste, taste, and space. The photos are mostly from Dakar and some rural areas in Senegal, the Peanut Basin. But I want us to keep in mind that this is all plays into a global conversation about plastic and plastic waste. So today and tomorrow we will be talking a lot about materials and how they are used to construct works of architecture. Buildings and structures are usually sedentary or static objects that are centers of our social lives, be it as homes, schools, religious establishments, state buildings. But with this presentation, I want to resituate the conversation of materials. I want to talk not about how they are used to construct sedentary structures, but how materials are essential to a social life in which the flow and movement of materials sustains cultural values and social networks. So what better material to zero in on for this thought exercise than plastic? It's something familiar to all of us. Plastic is everywhere in the globe. It's an icon of this thing we call modernity, but of late it's earning a reputation as a bit of a nuisance. Plastic is an incredibly efficient and useful material, hence its ubiquity. Lightweight but durable, plastic facilitates the global flow of goods. Plastic encapsulates clean drinking water. Plastic bottles carry liquid dish soap to clean dishes. Plastic basins are used to clean our clothing, to wash our babies and toddlers. We rely on plastic for maintaining cleanliness and hygiene. So these are not just practices of necessity, but of values surrounding taste and repulsion as well. Clean drinking water is a necessity, but clean bottled drinking water, bottled in plastic, becomes a tasteful, aesthetic commodity. Attributes that drive consumption of water as a fashionable good beyond a mere necessity. But then our plastic bottles Our ripped, flimsy plastic bags, our broken plastic wash basins are discarded, and plastic becomes the very thing we use it to avoid. It becomes waste. The item loses their commodity value, their aestheticism, and they become repulsive. And as you know, plastic does not biodegrade. This is one of the reasons it's so great, really. It has replaced heavy breakable glass and carton that is too degradable, but now we think of its non-biodegradability as why it's so harmful. So waste is not merely tastelessness, it's not just repulsive in terms of cultural value, but plastic waste poses a real impediment to other movements, the movements of storm water through drains and canals and away from residences. It causes intestinal blockage in livestock who ingest plastic bags. Plastic waste is a real menace to public health, and it is an infrastructural challenge to bustling cities like Dakar. African countries, in fact, have spearheaded efforts, global efforts, to solve this plastic problem. Capital cities and whole African states have banned plastic bags and put tariffs on plastic bags to reduce the population's consumption and then the flow of plastic into the waste stream. Jamena in Chad, Rwanda, South Africa, all these countries have taken made different efforts to reduce plastic consumption. But as you can see, maybe guess from the photograph, Senegal has not yet imposed any restrictions, but the conversation is happening. So I find this term waste stream ironic and inaccurate. The waste stream refers to how objects move through space once they have been discarded or once they become waste. But plastic waste does not flow like the term stream suggests. It gets stuck and it accumulates. Also with regards to this term stream, plastic in particular is so essential to how we move water and move through water in bottles, in water sachets. However, once it's discarded, it becomes an incredible obstacle to how we move water itself away from us as stormwater runoff and other refuse. So the waste stream ends at the waste dump. Dakar's main waste dump, Babes, was set to close in 2008 but remains open today. The dump concentrates all the waste and with it all the potential for adverse effects on public health.